Good morning, YouTube family. How are we today? My name is Anthony. This is Paul Meta Prepared. And today, I figure since it's Wednesday, let's go ahead and jump back into the Warrior Wednesday Spotlight. And today we're going to talk about a guy named Eddie Rickenbacker. Now, if y'all haven't heard of him, don't worry, I hadn't either until I did a little bit of research for this segment. And when I came across the story, it was one of those things where it's like, I have to put this on my channel. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Eddie was born in 1890 in Ohio. He had a Swiss family, the immigrant Swiss family, and he was, basically led an uneventful early years, except for the fact that he had a few brushes with death, which basically happened because he liked to push the limits. Now, unfortunately, when he was 13 years old, his father died. Now, according to his autobiography versus his biography, it's conflicting reports of how he died. It doesn't really matter. All it does matter is the fact that when he was in junior high, he had to basically quit school to start working to help support his family. Now, being with so many brothers and sisters and a mother in the early 1900s, he had to pick up a few odd jobs, but he ended up working for a buggy corporation where he started tinkering around with cars, since he had a natural inclination to work on machines. This led him to becoming a person who wanted to go fast and being a race car driver. So he was actually in the Indianapolis 500 4 times before World War I. Now, this is where it leads into, because he was a race car driver, and because he was so good at what he did, when the Germans or the Americans declared war on Germany in 1917, he automatically enlisted like that. Now, he got sent over to be trained in France, and he wanted to be a pilot. Now, unfortunately, even back then, you had to have a college degree or whatever to become a pilot, but because he was so good at what he did, being a race car driver and engineering, he ended up practicing flying and proved that he was so good at flying, they ended up giving him a chance. And now, what a chance it was, because basically he was shooting down aircraft left and right. Now, this is obviously the first war with aircraft, so no one had seen a dogfight before. No one had seen, with the capabilities of aircraft combat, or air combat. Well, the Army Air Corps followed his distinguished service, and he ended up shooting down or winning 26 battles, 26 aerial victories. Now, this gave him several service medals, and he was actually given the Medal of Honor because of his, gallantry and his valor in 1930. Now, after his service in 1919, he was discharged from the military, and he went back to working with cars, or automobiles. He was with Cadillac, and then he opened up his own automotive company called Rickenbacker Motor Company. Now, his idea was to have four-wheel brakes. Didn't really catch on. Everyone else had two-wheel brakes. The car suffered from lack of sales, and it ended up going out of business in, I believe, 1926. But that didn't stop him from staying with cars, because he bought Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 1927. And after doing that and rehabilitating the facility, he ended up getting back into air travel and airlines. He was a small stint with GM Airlines, and then he got with Eastern Air. Now, with Eastern Air, he became the vice president for most of the time, and then president, and he ended up running the company. Now, while doing so, he had many, let's just say, unfavorable things to say about President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And because he didn't like his New Deal, ended up thinking that was very socialistic in mind, and he didn't like the idea that his pilots were taken as to deliver mail, because that's just the way everything was kind of working at the time. A lot of deaths happened, and it was kind of needless to say. So he ended up butting heads with Franklin Delano Roosevelt until what? The start of World War II. And then with the start of World War II, he ended up being brought along with the Army as a consultant, or a civilian contractor is what we would say these days. And in doing so, he ended up getting put on a B-17 to go overseas. And this is where the real story of survival actually starts. Now, 1942, 10 months into the war, Eddie was given the mission to take a secret oral message to General MacArthur from the Secretary of War. Now, in order to do that, he had to get physically on a B-17 bomber and fly through the Pacific to deliver this message. However, unfortunately, their aircraft ran out of fuel because they lost their navigational equipment, wasn't working. They lost sight of Canton Island, where they were supposed to refuel at. Now, they were in radio dispatch, they were in signal, but they couldn't find the island. They kept circling, couldn't even find a boat, and they ended up having to let that plane down in the water. Now, in their haste to get out, they got their had the life preservers and their life rafts, but they left the food and rations and the thermoses full of water. The only thing they actually had was 4 oranges that one of the men was able to put in their pocket. So they were in these life rafts floating for days, sunburn, blisters, nastiness, and fortunately for Eddie, he was still in a civilian suit and his fedora, so he was mostly protected from the sun, but the salt water still blistered his body because it was in the raft. Now, on day 8, a seagull actually landed on his head, and he was able to grab hold of the seagull, and they were able to have a good meal for the first time in 8 days. Now, it's not a very big meal, but hey, food's food. Now, these rafts, there was 3 of them. They were all wrapped together or strapped together, tied, tethered, however you want to put it. One of the men, one of the weakest, who has been overcoming an illness, he made the unfortunate decision to drink seawater. And that would prove to be fatal later on, because shortly thereafter there was several squalls that dumped out fresh water. They were able to catch in their little survival pans that were in the raft, or survival buckets they had in the raft, and drink that to survive. But so the one guy who drank seawater ended up not making it. Now, around day 20 or so, they had all come to the conclusion they needed to split up. Rickenbacker wanted to stay together, but the others had decided that the best solution to survive would be to cut the tether and then just float off in different directions, so they could all kind of point in whatever direction would be to, if they found somebody, to survive. Now, one of them ended up, 3 of the men on one of the rafts ended up on an island. One of them, the one on his own, was caught by found by a naval float plane, and he was able to point them in the direction of Eddie's raft, where it was him and the 2 of the weakest survivors. This was on day 24 in November of 1942. So after 24 days at sea, they were rescued, and sure enough, you figure, hey, he'd lost 40 pounds. You figured, hey, he's done. He's ready to go home. But no, he continued on and went back and delivered that message and continued doing things he needed to do to support the war. Now, after the war was over, he went back to being the CEO of Eastern Airlines. The company did financially well until about the mid to late 50s, when he was ousted in 59. This obviously forced him into retirement, and he basically just toured the country then, as giving speeches and basically being a motivational speaker of some sort. Now, he died in 1973 at the age of 82 from a heart attack when he was in Switzerland, and his wife survived him for another 10 to 15 years, I don't remember. But this is one of those stories where I wanted to share on my channel, because it's a story of survival. I mean, he lived an absolutely amazing life, and I think that everybody should be able to pull something from his life story, to where you can kind of use it to kind of push through, if that makes sense. So by all means, if you want to do some more research on him, his name is Eddie Rickenbacker, Edward Rickenbacker. I'm sure there's plenty of sources online for it. I got a lot of my information from American Heritage, and I will post some of the links down below. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and end the video now. If you learned something, by all means, go ahead and give me a like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will catch y'all later, okay? Bye.